joyride, because the topic tonight, inshallah, is one that's near and dear to me specifically. All right, so hopefully they can hear me now, inshallah. So as I was saying, that's a big echo. Is there? You did too. Okay, all right. So as I was saying, the topic tonight, while we will be getting into some very minute details related to atheism, how to, the proofs against those that claim otherwise, the proofs for God, and things like that. The reason why this course is extremely important is because it's not just limited to, let's say, specific arguments against atheists. And as we're going to see in a few minutes, inshallah, the scope of what we covered is just a tad bit broader than all of that, inshallah. So a couple of things before we jump right into the content itself. My teaching style is such that I like a lot of interaction. So if you came here tonight thinking, okay, 7 to 9, I can go there, 2 hours lecture, I can stay awake during the whole thing, I'm gonna chill, it's good, you will be sorely mistaken, okay? So if you feel like you're not gonna interact, guess what, you will be interacting. So as I call on people, don't be shocked, okay? That's number one. That being said, the sisters upstairs, if you are comfortable with it, I would recommend you come down here, not only because of the slides, but because of the interaction, right? Again, if you're comfortable with it. So that's that, just giving you a warning before we start, inshallah. Okay, with that said, sure, the clicker is working with the Zoom, but or without it. Okay, there we go. Is it working? It is working. Okay. So the day and age that we live in, we actually are faced with a number of issues and problems and what we call worldviews. All right. So what you have up there, obviously the first one that this course is about, atheism, liberalism, transgenderism, postmodernism. Anyone have heard of postmodernism? Nobody heard of postmodernism? Remember, this is interactive, so if you guys want to interact, I'm just going to start calling on people straight up. All right, how many people have heard of postmodernism? Okay, how many people know what it is and can explain it? Okay, one person. Okay, yeah, it's quite an interesting area. Nihilism, all right, feminism, Buchanism, Kulism. All of these things that you may have heard of some of them and you may not have heard of some of them. How many heard of Buchanism? No. Kulism? Okay, good, because I just made those up. I just threw those on there, but they're not good. Okay, but there's a certain point I'm trying to make with that, and that is that when you go to a course, I could come now and tell you, look, here are some of the contentions related to the existence of God. And here's the answer that you'll take. And so each contention, we go through every single question, and fair enough. But instead of doing that, what I think would be better, and this is kind of a strategy we follow at Sapiens Institute, it's related to this old adage, right? And the old adage, I'm sure you guys are familiar with, that you could, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man a fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. What this course is about, it's about giving you those fundamental tools, what we call epistemic, psycho-spiritual tools. Don't worry, we'll get into those terms in a second. To be able to deal with whatever issues come, whether they are related to atheism specifically, or they're offshoots of atheism, like issues with like liberalism or feminism and so on and so forth. Okay? So that's basically what we want to do, is to empower you with these tools such that when you leave this class, any sort of new issue that arises, you have a foundation to be able to deal with it. Now, that being said, we're not going to just leave you with foundation. We will get into some details. We will get into, the contingency argument for the existence of God. We'll get into philosophy and science. We're going to get into a few, details like that. But those are going to be mostly tomorrow, by the way. All right. What we're going to be doing today is the following. We're going to start with what we call a metaphysical backdrop. Okay. Anyone know what metaphysical is? What the term refers to? So an easy way of understanding it is what we may call that beyond the physical. Okay, an easy way of understanding it. But anytime you see the term meta, it's related to kind of foundations. So when you talk about a topic like meta language, you're talking about those terms which have kind of a certain meaning that you can't go beyond the meaning. So the typical example is truth, beauty, and goodness. Right? Those are that's part of your meta language. You can't go below that. It's a foundation. You can't go below the ground, basically, right? You build upon that. So you wouldn't ask the question, is truth true? Is good good? Is beautiful, is beauty beautiful? Rather, it's an evaluated term to say, okay, humility is good, right? That belief is true. That piece of art is beautiful, right? So that's what we know as meta language. You have meta ethics, which we're going to be talking about tomorrow, right? So not is this particular thing moral or immoral, but why is it moral or immoral? We're going to get into a bit of a deep discussion, a deep dive about that. We talk about morality all the time, right? And people always knock us for a bunch of different things, right? Like, oh, slavery in Islam, the age of Aisha, and all these other moral issues. And yet, nobody really talks about the meta ethic. And inshallah, this course, we're going to be getting into that a little bit, right? Before we get to those questions, you're going to find out that you have to understand metaphysics, right? So metaphysical backdrop is what we're going to start with. And I'm going to start with a certain statement and a certain claim that I'm going to try to prove. And that is that Islam is not a religion. So how many people believe Islam is a religion? Okay, so 2 hands there, 2 hands here, 1 or 2 hands here. Maybe saying up there is here. Some of you like, okay, well, maybe I should say it. Okay, all right. We're going to take a deep dive into that. We're going to next look into what is a worldview, and I'll explain that when we get there, inshallah. There's a certain conception about how we understand the world around us. That's what we talk about. We talk about worldviews, components of a worldview, and then one area that I think is extremely important, and that is the limits rationality. Because a lot of times in the day and age that we live in, we assume that you can rationalize literally anything. And we want to ask the question then, does our rationality have limits? And how do we determine those limits? What are the limits and what is an appropriate limit to our rationality? Where does it become something like, oh, reason and faith? And you just believe that on faith, you have that claim. But no one's going to say like, okay, so I can rationalize everything. So how do we determine that limit and what are those limits? So we'll look into that. We're going to get into the definition of atheism, which is extremely important. We'll look at something known as the fiqh and first principles, which is related to the limits of rationality. And if we have time, we'll look at the implications of life without God. In other words, that if you say that God doesn't exist, that has certain logical implications. That has certain, that means certain things for you in terms of how you're able to view things. For example, if you say that God doesn't exist and all we are material matter, then why does it matter? In other words, how do you establish valuation? How do you value something, right? Why am I as a human being more valuable than this clicker? Okay, if it's just matter, what gives me value over this clicker if you take God out of the picture? So we're going to be looking at that and the implications of life without God. That's one of the implications. How do you establish value? Okay, let's start in earnest. So the claim I'm trying to make is that Islam is not religion. Is feminism religion? So, crickets. Oh. So, is feminism a religion? Sir, right here. Put it on your phone. By the way, one of my pet peeves, you jump on your phones, just wanted to look it up and say, is feminism a religion? Google, right? Okay. Is feminism a religion? No. Okay. Does anyone think feminism is a religion? Do any of the sisters think that feminism is a religion? Okay. Let me ask you this. If I came and I said that I am of the opinion that women don't need rights, women shouldn't have rights, how many people agree? How many people buy it here? Okay. Probably nobody. So should women have rights? Yes, everyone agree. Women should have rights. Sisters agree. Women should have rights. Why?
Because it's food.
Because it's what? It's what?
It's food. It's something to eat.
Women's rights are like food.
It's nice.
Oh, you call it rights? No, I didn't say rights. I mean rights. Right, like civil rights, women's rights. I see where his mind is going, but rights, you know, rights, man. All right, fair enough. Okay. Why should women have rights? Everyone should have rights. Okay, sisters, why do women have rights? Okay, why should they be treated equally? Because Allah says no. Okay, let's say you're atheist. Why should they be treated equally? Take a lot out of the picture.
We're all human.
So what? And okay, and okay, should humans and dogs have the same rights? Yes, you said yes. Should they? No. Okay. Okay. How different species based on what? Animals and humans. That's a taxonomical commitment, right? So why? Okay, so one word that we it should be equal. All right. I'm asking, let's justify that. Tell me from
Minimize that.
minimize all right. Is that good? Okay. So some say, okay, well, people should be equal. Okay, why? Take God out of the picture. You need a philosophical justification as to why we should have equality. You're not allowed to invoke Allah. No God, nothing. Yes.
So people have like their own consciousness and their own interests, like beyond their own survival, that animals don't.
Okay, because people have consciousness,
Yeah.
what gives consciousness value?
You have the ability to make decisions beyond just what allows you to survive. So it allows you to create.
What gives decision making value?
Like us building this mosque,
So what?
we made that decision, so we created it.
Good. Why is that valuable? Who cares? Well, okay, so when you say equality is based on values, based on yada yada yada, I'm saying, how can you prove that? Like, why is that true? Foundationally, remember, you take a lot of the picture, what gives you value? You're saying it should be equal. But I'm still talking about the equal part. Why should it be equal? Yeah.
Inequality normally brings in a sort of inequilibrium. So to maintain the equilibrium across,
Okay.
saying there should be equality.
What's wrong with inequality? You said, okay, inequality. No, sorry, but this should be
Equilibrium.
equilibrium. What's wrong with not having equilibrium? I say, what? I don't care about. I don't want equilibrium. Oh, yeah.
There's an innate morality.
Innate morality.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what.
The whole other camp. Okay. Yes. Okay, well, if you ask me the question why they are not equal, I'm saying this is my subjective opinion. I think it's true though. I don't think they should be equal. I'm fine with that. But what I'm asking all of you is that if you take God out of the picture, why should people be equal? How can you justify equality under a paradigm or a worldview that takes God out of the picture? Because if anything, in society, you don't actually observe equality. If the one thing you know for sure is inequality. All of our us in this room are totally different. Yes or no? Some people are taller, some people are shorter, some people are more intelligent, some people are less intelligent. If anything, you can justify inequality before you justify equality. It sounds like a social construct at the end of the day. In fact, it's part and parcel of the liberal worldview, part of liberalism. But we've adopted it such that people don't be equal. But now, if you take God out of the picture, how are you going to give valuation? How are you going to philosophically justify that? There are so many philosophical pre-assumptions or presuppositions that you set into that we haven't even thought about. Okay, let's look at feminism for a second. With feminism, how do they justify that women should have rights? There's a certain assumption that feminists have. Anyone know what that assumption is? In fact, all of liberalism has this assumption, but we'll stick with the feminists. Any sisters up there? No?
They didn't have rights to begin with, and then they fought for their own rights.
Okay, so what I'm asking is a philosophical justification. What I mean by that is, okay, in a way that we can describe their history, sure, there were no rights and now there are rights. Fair enough. But again, it goes back to the question, how do we justify that in the first place, philosophically? In other words, there's a certain assumption, right? Let me just spell it out if we're limited in time. That assumption is one that you will see in the abortion debate. Okay, so for those of you who know about the abortion debate, there's two sides. Anyone know what the two sides are in the abortion debate? You know what they are? No. Oh, okay. Who else? Guys, you live here in, we're in the US, right? Like in June, Roe versus Wade was overturned, right? Pro-life, pro-choice. Thank you. All right, pro-life, pro-choice. For those who side in pro-life, the feminists, pro-choice. With the feminists, you'll see that when they are protesting outside of Planned Parenthood, some of them are holding up a sign. What does that sign say? My body, my rights. My body, my rights. Because the philosophical assumption under feminism is that we own ourselves. You start with that, and like I said, that's something throughout all of liberalism is self-ownership. In other words, the way to philosophically justify the fact that women should have rights and so on and so forth is to say we own ourselves. And if that's the case, that itself becomes very different. Now, under the Islamic paradigm, do we hold that we own ourselves? No. You go to any funeral, and what are the words that everyone says? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong. We are owned by Allah. So right there, the philosophical foundations of feminism are totally antagonistic to the theo-philosophical foundations that we have. Right at the onset. Okay? Here's why I'm mentioning this. This entire discussion that we have, if we say that Islam is a religion, it's very easy to take Islam, put it in a conceptual box called religion, and say this has nothing to do with feminism. You're not allowed, in a sense, to compare feminism with Islam until you get with certain pre-assumptions. Okay, that's why I'm asking this question. Is feminism a religion? If it's not a religion, can we, and Islam is a religion, are we justified to compare both of them? Now, we just did compare both of them. But you could easily take Islam as a religion and say that's not part of this discussion. Because essentially you put it in a box called religion. Okay. And this clicker is it's not being friendly with me today. Here's my central thesis. I don't know if I have this anymore. Okay, here's my central thesis. Understanding Islam as a religion does not allow us to accurately compare it to dominant ideologies as feminism, transgenderism, liberalism. Therefore, Islam is not a religion. Now, I want to highlight something and just kind of give a note of caution here. Not really a note of caution, but just a preliminary discussion as to why this is important. Okay, a couple years ago, I went to the UK, and when I was there, I was with some of the brothers there, we were at the gym, and I was like, look, where's the bathroom, man? And they're like, oh, it's, wherever, just go there and get there. So I get there, and I see this sign. And so I go back to the front, there's only one bathroom. Like, they don't have like multiple bathrooms. So I see this sign, and I'm really confused. So I go back, and I'm like, I tell some of the brothers, like that the toilet over there is out of order. It's not working. So they come back, and they're like, it's so they come back and they look at it and they say, no, man, it's staying in the toilet. I'm like, yeah, it's not working. No, it's for the handicapped. Right? So, I mean, you can't really knock me for that, because when I see disabled, I'm thinking it doesn't work, right? Because why? There's a cultural difference between how I understand disabled and how the Brits understand disabled, right? How they use it. With that being said, I think religion falls into the same category. Now, when we look at the word religion, we can say that you can look at it in two domains. There's a normative understanding, and this word normative can be very important, by the way, so we'll define it in a second. There's a normative understanding of religion, and there's a descriptive understanding of religion. So when we talk about a normative understanding, that's how something describes itself or how it should be. A descriptive understanding is simply describing something or how something is understood by the listener. So let's take an example. The word Islam. We'll compare a normative understanding of the word Islam and a descriptive understanding. If I was to ask one of you here in the masjid, what does Islam mean? How do you define Islam? So, how do you define Islam? What's the word mean? Bismillah, go for it. What the word Islam mean? This is the easiest question of tonight, by the way. It's even easier than the remember one. You want to take a pass? You take a pass. Okay, sister, what does Islam mean? Submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, perfect. Okay. If I was to go to a place like, let's say, Midland, Texas, okay, it's a small little place in Texas, and I was to ask a random person on the street, hey man, what does Islam mean? Now, what they're going to tell me is something to the effect of, you need that crazy people stop, kill all these people. That's Islam. Okay? Why? Because when this person hears the word Islam, it is a descriptive attribute for him. Meaning he may have gone to church, his pastor had told him Islam is the devil, blah, 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 and all of that now comes to pass. So when he hears the word Islam, what comes in his mind is what I just mentioned. Okay? That's a descriptive understanding of Islam. A normative understanding of Islam is what does Islam say about itself? The easiest way to understand that, go to the hadith of Jibreel, right? You remember, I'm sure you're familiar with the hadith. You know, Jibreel comes in, comes as a man, asks the Prophet Sallallahu Islam. The Prophet then goes forward and describes the 5 pillars. Simple. That's what Islam defines itself as. That's a normative understanding. That is the normal way it should be understood based on the word itself, based on the definition itself. Okay? Everyone clear about this? If we were to take a normative understanding of religion, you could say that Islam is a religion if it was understood in the pre-modern sense. Okay? But religion as it's understood today in the descriptive sense, you can't put Islam in that category. Because if you go to a random person in the street and say, what's a religion? They'll tell you Buddhism, Christianity, they'll throw Islam in there, but they would never say feminism. Right? Religion has a certain conceptual domain. Islam is way outside that domain. Right? You ever heard this expression like, Islam is a deen, and a deen is a fiqh? Heard that expression, right? Okay? In essence, there's a lot of truth to that. So when we look at you can say the antecedents of the term religion, and we can see that they have certain antecedents of the term itself. And so this comes from a book called What is Islam? It's a really big, difficult book to get through. And I'll just read it out and then kind of explain it for a second. So fundamental here. Now he's going back to where did the term religion come from in the first place? He says fundamental here are the consequences of the fact that the concept and term religion, as it is used today in the language of modern analysis, both by scholars and laymen, emerged in the wake of the devastating European wars of religion. The very word itself and our conceptualization of it is not something that's universal. It's not transitory. It is something that is rooted specifically in an event that happens in Europe. Okay? So he says, these European wars of religion as a product of Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment Europe. Religion was articulated as instrument and expression of the social and intellectual struggle of Europeans to free themselves from the monopoly of the totalizing truth claims that were made by and exercised from the social, political, and intellectual material institution of the Christian church. In other words, the concept of religion is that which is pitted against or juxtaposed with the concept of the church. The problem is, if you were to take the very same concept and go to the Islamic world, in the pre-modern Islamic world, you don't have an institution that is specific like the church that tells you this is true, it's false. The entire paradigm is different. There's no institution that says, okay, this is what you have to believe, this is what you don't believe. Don't worry about reading the Quran. Right? Two very different dynamics. In fact, when you look at something like accessibility to the Bible at that time, the Bible doesn't come into common vernacular until when Martin Luther comes about, start translating it into all these different languages, and now people have direct access to the Bible. Is that true to the Quran?
No.
No way. From the very onset, what does the Prophet say? خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. The best of you is the one who learns the Quran and teaches it. So this entire paradigm that's Eurocentric, it doesn't allow Islam to speak for itself, and it doesn't give it the breadth that it needs, right? So when we quarantine Islam to this conceptual box called religion, it affects us as well. Because then we can make a distinction between, oh, that particular thing, that's a political issue, that's a social issue, that's feminism, that's liberalism, that's not, we're not worried about Islam because Islam is just something that's a private affair. We're not going to take that into public. Okay. So the goal of me kind of mentioning this is that what I'd like for us to do is have a conceptual shift now. So if Islam is not a religion, what are we supposed to say? And I'll end with this in terms of Islam being religion. It's a good statement. In the medieval Islamic understanding, it was religion. Actually, not this one. Let's skip this one. When we make religion our lens, rather than say truth or meaning, we are confronted with the difficulty in conceptualizing Islam. What Islam is truth. And it's infused with meaning. And if you just say that it's going to be, again, quarantined to a box called religion, you don't allow it to have the definition that itself has. You don't allow it to be normative. Okay? Now, let's take a look and why I'm going to substantiate this point a little further. The term deen, is not a deen? Okay. Is deen religion? Yeah. Okay. When you look at the term deen as it's used in the Quran, as it's used in our sources, what you find is that because we are so accustomed to using the word religion, sometimes translators make mistakes. And this is probably one of the, I'm just shocked when I saw it. So this particular example comes from Surah Yusuf. All right, so how many people know the story of Yusuf? Okay, few people. Check those out. You gotta do some work, man. Okay, great. All right. So long story short, at the end of the story, because I can't get into the entire story, there's a certain scenario where Yusuf becomes the finance minister after everything that happens, and he wants to keep his younger brother Binyamin, he has an affinity towards, he has an affection towards, but he wants to keep him in a certain dynamic, right? And it's the fact that he's the finance minister, he has to follow a certain, certain legal system. Okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, so he began the search of their bags for the bag of his brother, and then he extracted it from the bag of his brother. Here he had planted a certain object in one of the bags of his brother, so that he could say, where did this object come from? We have to hold it back and take it out of the kingdom. Okay. Thus did we plan for Joseph. He could not have taken his brother within the religion of the king. What does the religion of the king have to do with anything in our understanding of the term religion? King could be Buddhist or Christian or whatever, right? In our understanding, the reality is the ayah said, "Fi deen al-malik." It's in the deen of the Malik. But what does that refer to? It's referring to the legal system that the king has instituted. That's why the term deen, it's got a tribal root which establishes things like a mother. In other words, you have a give and a take. That's why debt is also called dain, under the same root, right? Under the same three letters. Why? Because when you give a debt, there's an expectation of a return. In a legal system, you are either rewarded or punished. And there's a criteria for that. And the deen establishes that criteria. And the deen, in order to give you that criteria, you have to have certain things in place. We're going to talk about it in a second. So even with translators, they made this faux pas. And the issue is that this becomes a conceptual issue. Because as we start to deal with these issues, we then are confronted with, okay, well, if Islam is just a religion, well, then we can't talk about X, Y, and Z and have a fair comparison. Okay? And we're going to see how this ties into just a second. Is this point clear? All right, anyone want to debate me on Islam being a religion? In the modern understanding, not the pre-modern understanding. Okay, fair enough. Okay, if that's the case, and we understand that a deen is comprehensive, so what we see is that a deen other than Islam is going to be false. Why? Because deen encompasses the entirety of truth. If you say it's a religion, you've now entered into the space to say your religion versus my religion. And you almost get to a point where you're offending people, right? Like, how dare you say Islam is, true and Christianity is not. But if you understand that how you view the world entirely, the lenses by which you look at reality is all Islam, and it's not just a religion, then it makes sense to say, yes, the truth should be prevalent, and everyone can agree with that. So when it comes to, like, for instance, this ayah here, وَالَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. It is he who sent his messenger with guidance and the deen of truth, لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. It is to make manifest over everything else. It's a bit difficult. You might get this conversation where, are you trying to say that Islam is trying to supersede and overtake everything else? It wants to dominate the world. So when you have it in the box of religion, it's difficult to have that conversation, right? Because we're just born violent or whatever, right? Because we happen to be Muslim. Yeah. But here's the thing. If you understand and conceptualize Islam as truth in its totality, and with the truth and meaning, then you would say, hold on a second, we want the truth to supersede and overcome everything else. The conversation of shifts, because now we talk about what is true and what is meaningful. Everyone with me so far? Yeah? Okay. All right. So a deen, and what we're going to say now, is that if we can't use the word religion, we're going to substitute a word called worldview. And we'll get into some details about this. So, if a deen is not a religion, what is it? We'll say it's a worldview. It's your entire spectrum of reality. How you view the world around you. Okay? And here's the important thing. A deen, other than Islam, will always have inconsistencies and cracks. Whether that deen, that worldview is feminism or liberalism or atheism, if you dig far enough and you try to get to the meta-analysis, you will always find problems. Always. Remember I was talking about feminism? Even the justification of self-ownership, how do you justify that? What makes us better humans than Allah? Are we more merciful than Allah? Are we more knowing than Allah? Are we more loving than Allah? Are we more just than Allah? You have to say that the one that actually deserves ownership is Allah, because he has attributes of maximal ownership, right? Whereas we are living. So even in terms of justification, even that is difficult, because you get into a lot of ethical issues. I'll give you one, don't worry. Some time ago in Germany, somebody took out an ad in the paper, and the ad basically stated that they wanted to experience a delicious meal of a human being. This is a real ad, real story. Okay, so you put an ad in the paper. Who would like to sign up to be eaten? Okay, you guys look at me. I'm telling you, it's like I can refer you to the article. Okay, so 200 people signed up, and mind you, he's not paying them anything. They're signing up shit only because of the experience of being eaten. So this guy interviews a bunch of people on video camera. He gets a document signed. He comes to a certain candidate. He's satisfied with him. Okay, the guy gets up and he eats. He kills him. He eats it, right? For who knows how long. He doesn't, room in his freezer, but he. So eventually, the German authorities they came. They this guy. Like, what's going on? And they had a problem because they had no laws against cannibalism. So they had something, how do you prosecute it? How are we going to deal with this issue? But one of the fundamental areas of defense that they had was to say, look, if we have self-ownership, that person got eaten, he signed a contract, he was on video, if he owns himself and he had his own volition, his own choice, wanted to be eaten, and we own ourselves, what's the problem? Right? So you see, whenever you find something outside of Islam, the worldview of Islam, you will always find inconsistencies and cracks. You just have to dig deeper. And that's true with atheism as well, by the way. Okay. Moving on. What is a worldview? All right, that's a lot of words. So actually, I'll stop there for a second. In your mind, what's a worldview? What's a worldview? Right there.
It's like a belief.
A belief. Okay.
That the entire world.
That the entire what? That the entire world holds. Okay, maybe. Everyone agree with that? Is they believe that the entire world holds? Majority holds. Anybody else? Yeah. Your own way of viewing the world. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, framework, lens. Okay, so let me give you the sophisticated erudite definition. A worldview is how you view the world. Deep, okay, no. Let me get into a little more details. A person's worldview represents his most fundamental beliefs and assumptions about the universe he inhabits. It reflects how he would answer all of the big questions. All right, so these are questions we call existential questions. In other words, what is the meaning and purpose of my life? How did I get here? What happens when I die? Those are the big questions. Those are your questions about your existence. So your worldview is it's a reflection of that. So it reflects how we would answer all the big questions of human existence, fundamental questions about who and what we are, where we came from and why we're here, and where, if any, we're headed, the meaning and purpose of life, the nature of the afterlife. Here's the important part. Few people think through these issues in any depth, and fewer still have a firm answer to such a question, but a person's worldview will at least incline him towards certain kinds of answers and away from others. Every single person has a worldview. In other words, it is the lenses by which you view reality. And you can compare it to like lenses, glasses that you wear. All right, so now imagine that I have glasses and they're tinted red, and you have glasses that are tinted green. And we step outside and we look at a tree in the summer, not now, and it's got leaves on it. And now I tell you, I said, no, the leaves on that tree are red. And you tell me, no, they're green. We would be arguing tooth and nail based upon our perception, our ocular perception, how we're viewing, because we're viewing it with two lenses. It's only until I get your glasses that are green that I can get, okay, yeah, green. Now, where this analogy falls short is that a worldview is not something you just take off like glasses. You cannot transcend a worldview. You can't be without a worldview. Because anyone that makes a claim to say, I'm without a worldview is part of their worldview, right? Okay? Every single person has lenses by which they view reality. No one is free of this. No human being can be free of it. Okay? So, if that's the case, let's get into everyone having a worldview. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can compare a worldview to a direction in face. Okay, so Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions, وَلِكُلِّ وِجْهَةٍ هُوَ مُوَلِّيهَا. Everyone has a direction towards which he faces. By the way, what is its title for you? You know? Change the middle, all right, 2 people. All right, come on. Step it up, man. Okay, it's a change of the Qibla. When I first read this, and I first read about changing the Qibla, and you start reading that people, they almost renege under, many people renege under Iman. It was very difficult times. But as someone living in the 21st century, you ask, like, it's a big deal. Like, you're facing this for your face. Why is that such a big deal? Because when you think about the concept of a qibla, you're thinking about a direction and literally a worldview that you're entirely shifting from one to the other. It's part of their worldview, which direction they're facing. Okay? And what the point here is that everyone has a direction towards which he faces. Interestingly enough, Ibn Kathir mentions that this talks about the followers of various adyan, deeds or religion, the translation is here. Hence, every nation and tribe has its own qibla which they choose, while Allah's appointed qibla is that which is the believer's face. And then he mentions another ayah, which I think is very significant here. He says, لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. Everyone has a law and a method. Why does he link these two things? You have a direction, you have a law and a method. Because when we understand that if our world is the lens by which we look at reality, then it means it is how we assume or what assume the assumptions that we made about the world that we have. And those assumptions have to do with, okay, what do we consider moral influence? But that's going to be determined by a number of factors, what we consider as a law and a method. Okay? Now, since I have a few minutes, worldviews, therefore, I'm going to end on this slide. Well, end on the next slide, just so I give you some motivation to come back. Worldviews also largely determine people's opinions on matters of ethics and politics. What a person thinks about abortion, euthanasia, same-sex relationships, environmental ethics, economic policy, public education will depend on their underlying worldview. The lens by which you look at reality, what you feel is true, the existence of God is true, that's going to define, that's going to give you, okay, well, this is what I believe is moral and immoral. This is my opinion on abortion, and this, and this, and this, and this. God is a part of that worldview. So if you don't have that as part of your worldview, that's going to determine what you consider ethical, what you consider unethical. A lot of the questions that people bring that knock the Islamic paradigm have to do with ethics. How can the process of marrying Aisha at the age of 6 and then coming to marriage at 9? There's an ethical discomfort with that. But that discomfort is dissipated once you have a certain understanding of where ethics come from and the things that precede the ethical discussion in the first place. So if that's the case, that all of these things are, your worldview is going to determine what you feel is, your opinion on these matters. What are the components of a worldview? And this is what we're going to talk about after this all. Our worldview is made up of a number of components. So you have, I know these maybe sound like very technical philosophical terms, but we're going to define each of these. Ontology relates to what you believe exists. Do I exist? Does the tree outside exist? Do you exist? Okay. Questions of epistemology have to do with how do we know? The study of knowledge. Right? How do I know what I know? Anthropology, who or what is man? Am I just material matter, or do I have a soul as well? Okay. Teleology. Is it all just, is there a purpose to all this? Does the universe have a purpose? Do I have a purpose? Or is it just meaningless? You have morals and ethics, and look how far down it comes. So before we start speaking about morals and ethics, all of those topics would have to be unraveled and dealt with. Okay. In ontology, you notice up there's a theology. Because one of the questions of ontology is, does the tree exist? Does much exist? Why exist? Does God exist? If your answer is yes, then you have a theology, which means you're speaking about the nature and relationship of the human being with God. Okay. Now we're going to delve into some details with this, but let's do that after Salah. If you take this concept home, that all you take tonight, inshallah, it's going to be inshallah a paradigm. Inshallah. Okay. We'll go and stop there. Jazakumullah khair. We'll break for Salah.